when George Floyd was saying, "I can't breathe," and then he died. And now we're wearing a mask, and we say, "I can't breathe," but we're being forced to wear it anyway.
The flu kills more than coronavirus.
I'll tell you another reason I hate masks. Most child molesters love them.
Now, those people are real. There's no creative editing. This isn't some joke here or an SNL skit. And you wonder where they got that idea to hate on the masks. Well, despite consensus in the scientific and the medical community saying wearing masks is one of the most critical things people can do to stop the spread of COVID, our president continues to be a poor role model.
If you feel more comfortable, you'll say a couple of words. You might want to take the masks off.
I can't hear you. You have your mask on. I can't hear a word.
You're going to have to take that off, please. Just, you can take it off. How many feet are you away?
I'll speak a lot louder.
Well, if you don't take it off, you're very muffled. So if you would take it off, it would be a lot easier. I just don't want to wear one myself. It's a recommendation. They recommend it. Again, I would wear one if I thought it was important.
Those close to him, including son-in-law and senior advisor Jared Kushner, also aren't exactly spreading the message when it comes to the importance of wearing masks.
Here was the scene yesterday and earlier over the weekend at the president's rally and event in Arizona and Nevada. You don't see much social distancing. You don't see many masks. What kind of message does that send?
Look, President Trump believes that people can make their own decisions. We put out guidance for how people should follow.
Okay, then I want to introduce you to a doctor, Scott Atlas, and I use the doctor term loosely, the man that our president tapped to advise him on the pandemic. That means he's one of the most important voices for our president. Now, he's a radiologist. He's got no background in infectious diseases. Why would we in a pandemic? He's also a fellow at the conservative Hoover Institution. He used to work at Stanford Medical School. I mention that because more than 70 of his former colleagues there just signed an open letter denouncing Dr. Atlas. They say he spreads falsehoods and misrepresentations of science. Their words. The letter goes on to say, quote, many of his opinions and statements run counter to established science and by doing so undermine public health authorities. The Stanford scientists point out that includes his questioning of the effectiveness of mask wearing and his past support of herd immunity, which means letting people build up resistance to the virus by just getting it. Take a listen to this doctor after being egged on by who else but Tucker Carlson, speaking why universal mask wearing is not needed.
There's no real good science on general population, widespread in all circumstances, wearing masks. And that really has been sort of a failure of communication by people who are supposed to know better.
No, those people know better. He's completely wrong or lying, but nonetheless here, no one of any repute in the scientific or medical community agrees with this clown. But I say that, and I play that bite because that Dr. Atlas, he has outsized influence when it comes to directly advising President Trump when it comes to COVID. The unmitigated disaster that has been this administration's response to the pandemic has since the beginning of the year been consistently defined as incompetence and unwillingness to accept and act upon scientific and medical fact. I'm going to stress that last word, fact. We have already lost roughly 200,000 of our fellow Americans, and the number is counting. The world, it pities our idiocy and our inept leadership. This virus, it is horrible enough, certainly, but when you have morons going maskless and imposing their idiocy on the rest of us, a health crisis goes from the very difficult to the near impossible if our goal is to resume some form of societal normalcy, which I pray we all share in that. Unimaginably, my president has at every turn egged on the worst instincts. He's attacked those who preached rationality and set the worst example possible. Now, up until last week, I'd always believed he was doing this because he was incapable or he was uninterested in realities if they didn't conform to his own self-interest. But then, my friends, I heard the tapes.
It's also more deadly than your strenuous flus. You know, people don't realize we lose 25,000, 30,000 people a year here. Who would ever think that, right?
I know. It's
pretty amazing. And then I say, well, is that the same thing? This is more deadly. This is 5 per. This is 5% versus 1% and less than 1%. So this is deadly stuff.
Okay. He knew. He knew all along how it was transmitted and how deadly it was. Yet, he wanted our pews to be packed on Easter. He wanted our stands filled at stadiums. He didn't want schools to shut down in spring. And he objected to making people wear masks. And Lord knows, he'd sooner ridicule you for setting the right example than doing so himself. Believe it or not, it gets even worse, though.
And Bob, it's so easily transmissible, you wouldn't even believe it.
I know.
You can be in the room. I was in the White House a couple of days ago, a meeting of 10 people in the Oval Office, and a guy sneezed innocently, not a horrible, just a sneeze. The entire room bailed out, okay, including me, by the way.
My president, who claimed COVID was no worse than the common flu, he ran for the door when a guy blew his nose. What happened to it disappearing like a miracle, or that in April it would vanish with the warmer temperatures? Captain Courageous, he didn't believe in masks because they were for sissies, right? It was all a show, and he was willing at the end of the day to encourage no mitigation and exposure, though, for you and me. Now, while he headed for the hills for a sneeze, but maybe for a guy who thinks of Americans as red and blue places, the press, the enemy of the people, and political critics evil, he could care less what happened to us. But what about those people? What about the people who wore the red hats and will go to any corner of this country to hang on his every lie? I mean every word.
Aren't you concerned about getting COVID, though, in an enclosed way?
No, I'm not concerned. I'm more concerned about how close you are, to be honest.
Sorry about that.
Because you know why? I'm on a stage that's very far away.
Did you hear him? And I'm saying this next part for you, if you still believe in this man. He doesn't care about you. You, his most loyal defender. You who try to excuse his immorality, his mocking of soldiers who died for this country, his attacks on the rule of law, his daily divisions of the very fabric of this nation. Last night in Phoenix, our president had an event, not unlike the event in a Tulsa arena that led to a huge spread of COVID and Herman Cain's untimely death, or the rally at Mount Rushmore where people were packed in without masks so he could have a backdrop, or even the event where he used our White House to cap the Republican convention where untested and unmasked supporters were brought in to applaud. All those times and so many other times. In these past few months, Donald Trump has said that there is nothing to fear. Let's get together and screw what the doctors and the scientists, your governors maybe, the rest of the modern world thinks. Trust me, the president, it's safe to party. If you look closely, before the event, Trump's organizers, they zip-tied the chairs together in Phoenix so they couldn't sit 6 feet, let alone 2 feet apart, even if they wanted to. And yes, of course, the attendees, they were discouraged from wearing masks. Their fearless leader, he too was maskless, but he, as you heard, was on a stage many, many feet away. That is what he really thinks of you. Disposable. Yet another group of suckers and losers that are a means to an end. My president knew, and he knew better than to risk his own health for the rest of us. And particularly for those who champion him as their voice in Washington, listen very carefully, because he's telling you exactly what he really thinks of you. Coming up next, Election Day. And the days that follow could be extremely chaotic, thanks largely in part to the guy I was just talking about there on your screen. He's intentionally fanning the flames of controversy. After the break, we'll run through some nightmare scenarios that we're concerned actually could happen.